Hey, welcome back. This is Josh Hewitt. This is another Straight to the Bar Gym Chats. This is Gym Chat number 258, and tonight we're live with Bud Jeffries. Welcome back, Bud. Thanks for joining us again on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed it last time, and I'm sure we'll enjoy it again.
Well, I appreciate you jumping in last minute. Like just a couple of days ago, I asked him if he could join me. We had an opening, and he graciously joined in. And we have a pretty cool topic for you tonight. We're going to be talking about questioning fitness authority, when it is appropriate to start questioning what you hear in the mainstream and even on the sideline, the edge, the hardcore fitness industry. Like what do you hear being touted as knowledge? What is conventional knowledge? What is the new cutting edge training methods? And when is it appropriate to question that and to take a different approach? So I look forward to getting into this. We might not see eye to eye on this, Bud, just letting you know, which would make for a good discussion as well. But that's great. Let's get into it, because I think, you know, in the end, it's really good to at least have be a critical thinker. Before we do get into it, if there are people who aren't familiar with your background or didn't check out our previous gym chat with you, do you mind just giving a brief sort of background how you got into this strength industry?
Sure, Josh. Yeah, mostly I started in the Zumba movement, and
Yeah, okay, I totally see that. Yeah,
well,
I remember seeing your Zumba. Yeah, Zumba for Strength CD. That was awesome. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, I'm a professional strongman. I've done 1,000 shows across America the last 4 years for doing strength exhibitions and feats and stuff for an anti-bullying tour. I've been a former competitive powerlifter, strongman, Highland Games athlete, fighter. Pretty much anything ridiculous and heavy that you've ever done. I've written about 8 books in the strength and conditioning field, and I do that because I love this as a thing. I want people to have the truth and the knowledge of what they're doing, and I was blessed to be in with some very smart people, and I want to share the knowledge that we have. So we have a website, and we do our best to communicate to people the truth about real top-end strength and being the best version of human being you can be.
Awesome. That's great, and that's a perfect summary of that. I'll definitely post a link down below of your site and some of your links, so go check those out. You want to learn a little bit more about his background. He's pretty much done it all in this industry, and he's been really well connected with some people who are very involved as well. So a lot to learn from this guy, and appreciate you being on tonight. Let's get into this. First of all, I guess this sort of just came up with us throwing out some ideas. As far as questioning fitness authority, or, you know, how I put in here is like when your trainer might be wrong. What are your thoughts on that? What made you come up with that? I think that might be a topic that's worthy to address.
Well, you know, I mean, again, we were just kind of brainstorming different topics or whatever, but it's a thought that's been on my mind recently so much because so much of the saleable information, and then so much of the actual information going around in gyms, or certainly on the internet, but certainly in face-to-face person on gyms, has no real basis. And so many of the people who get into this industry have no real basis from which to speak. And let me quantify what I want to talk about with that. Okay, and this is kind of what you and I were talking about prior to the broadcast. You have people who are amazing athletes who have little or no education or ability to share what they know, and they do so because they're just lucky to copy people who were good before them. And then you have people who have a dozen letters behind their name and have no real world experience, and who have no ability to, you know, you can spend your lifetime at the university studying this, but if you haven't put your hands on people and trained them live and figured out what works for you and other people, you really don't have any business telling people what to do, especially if you haven't used yourself as a huge experiment. Now, there's the balance there of those two things. And those things, because of so much of what's wrong with our industry, have been on my mind a lot lately. And, you know, I regularly see these ads with people who, you know, oh, buy my course. And I saw one the other day that swore, I thought this was funny to me, that I don't remember exactly what the wording, but, you know, this is all sales marketing stuff. Everybody in the world's got it wrong. This one study has proved that this is the right to add superhuman size and be the hugest guy ever. And the guy who wrote the ad was moderately muscled, but not particularly impressive in any way or that kind of thing. And it was literally just an idea to sell you stuff on an opposite perspective of, I'll go the opposite way everybody else does, and blah, 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 blah. And it was taking an isolated little study and trying to build an entire course on all of that whole thing. And and there's just so much of that's wrong with that what's going on, and I think maybe that's one of the symptomatic ways you can tell that your trainer is wrong in some ways, and here's what I mean. Okay, uh, there's a huge disparity in what people tell you what you should eat. I mean, huge, 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 huge,
Hmm.
and huge disparities on what you tell you should train. And yeah, some people who do some way crazy outside stuff get some great results, but I'm not in any way telling you to follow the mainstream. But if he tells you something ridiculous, is probably you should think for yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll give you an example of this. That this was obviously a joke. Arnold made a joke about this one time and talked about. He said people come up to me, tell me how to get huge all the time, and sometimes it ticks me off, and I tell them stuff, and he just made up the wildest crap ever. He said, "Hey, here's what I do," and literally what he said was, I take a walnut shells and crush them up into a fine powder, and I mix that with a teaspoon of salt, and I take one every day, and I add a teaspoon every day for 21 days. You know what I'm saying? And some of the stuff floating around out there is that
Sounds like that.
kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous. Because literally, if you took 21 teaspoons of salt and crushed up walnut shells, it would kill you. It
Yeah.
would, you see what I mean? I mean, there's intelligence in training, and there's stuff that's actually gets amazing results that's way out of the mainstream. But if there isn't some kind of basis for what, or if they can't give you a logical reason,
Yeah.
you should be paying attention. There's got to be a logical reason behind why.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes even if there is a logical reason behind it, or if there are legitimate scientific studies to back it up, I think sometimes it's taken to the extreme where, and I've done this myself, I hate cardio,
Yeah.
long, slow cardio. So I
Mhm.
bash it, but there is research to show that if your goal is fat loss, that short burst cardio intervals is beneficial. If I'm to be totally honest, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to eliminate long, slow cardio all the time or that it's evil. So, you know what I mean? That would be like a contrarian, what you're talking about, contrarian fitness information sells, being antagonistic sell.
Yeah.
Oh, mainstream industry is saying everyone should do, cardio is not so much now, but it was like cardio is the basis of fitness, whatever. And so if you go opposite and you be, antagonistic, oh, that's marketable, right? So, yeah,
Right.
definitely, but there's, there has to be a balance. And I think you're right. Whenever you hear something that's like everything else is wrong, this is the only way, maybe you want to question that.
Right.
Maybe it is a good training method, but does that mean it's at the exclusion of everything else, or that,
Yeah.
that this has to be the be all and end all? And that was one other good point I just want to touch on, just to emphasize it, that you mentioned that some people, pardon me, are extremely good athletes, and that could be genetically gifted or genetics plus, exogenous hormonal supplementation could
Yeah.
make them an amazing athlete. That does not necessarily mean that the way they're training will make you an amazing athlete, or that they can train you to be that. And the same thing you said with very well qualified and certified and educated, but no time under the bar, like they had no real world experience. That was something to question too. So yeah, definitely these are some
Yeah.
good.
Let me
What?
expound on that too, because
Yeah.
I think there is a point here where people do make a mistake here, and I'll tell you what it is. Okay, total genetic freaks is where the the out where you need to discount that as far as the way as the training. And here's what I mean by that. Okay, one of my good friends, a strength coach, NFL, and told me a story about literally having a 4-year college starter superstar on the
Hmm.
football field come to him, and the guy could barely bench press 225, and what he did do, and I'm talking about not a skill position player, an actual lineman type player. The guy
Hmm.
was a freak on the field, but he did not know how to correctly perform a bench press.
Hmm.
Okay, now that comes from the uh, the guy who looks like an amazing athlete, who is a freaking amazing athlete, who just happens to be able to play and sits in this specialty position where coaches don't push him and they allow people to get away with stuff. But here's where I think that is taken back. Okay, you look at a lot of your top end bodybuilders, you look at your top end powerlifters, top end strongmen. Okay,
Hmm.
they are good athletes, and some of them from their size are genetic freaks. Okay,
Yeah.
but most of those guys tend to do a lot of the same stuff, and they didn't necessarily start off lifting more than anybody else on the planet, but they did get there. Even though they
Hmm.
are top end genetics, they're not the absolute super end freak where somebody just walks up and never lifts weights or that kind of thing. Here's what I'm saying with that. A lot of people in the average fitness world like to pull that card and say, don't follow what those strongmen or powerlifters do because they're all just genetic freaks. Well,
Hmm.
not so much. And if
Okay,
every
fair enough.
genetic freak on the planet has a particular thing that they do that is in real training, that is, and I'm not talking about necessarily the exact thing, but the particular thought process behind the way they do things is a thing, maybe you should be looking at that as that actually is a smart thing to do versus, you know what I'm saying? There
Yeah.
really is. In other words, okay, if you cross-sectionally took the top end of every genetic freak, Olympic lifter, power lifter, bodybuilder, strongman across the world, everybody squats, everybody presses, everybody pulls. Not everybody does it the same way, but everybody does it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Therefore, that's not something that you discount as, oh, that's just a genetic
No.
freak. No, that's how the human body functions, genetic freak or not.
Yeah, that's a good
So,
point.
you know,
Yeah. What do the best of the best have in common? Exactly.
absolutely,
Aside
yeah.
aside from
Which you can
genetics. Yeah, exactly.
throw out from a marketing perspective and just say, well, oh, I don't do that because only genetic freaks do that. I'll tell you who loves to pull that card is the bodyweight crew. The,
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
the only bodyweight exercises, and I love bodyweight exercises,
yeah,
but let's not discount the reality of what the real deal is. Okay,
yeah.
and often those guys are the opposite in genetic freak. Most of those guys come from a lot of those guys, and not most, but a lot of them come from a gymnastics background, and gymnastics is full of genetic freaks exactly as much as powerlifting or anywhere
Yeah.
else is. So even those guys, okay, have the same rules to follow. Okay, even 135-pound gymnasts who are genetically freakishly able to do that, they still do tons of pull-ups and
Hmm.
abdominal work and push-ups and handstand type push-ups and that kind of thing. There's still a trail to follow for what's smart.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Yeah, they're yeah they have the favorable leverage and whatnot for their sport. Exactly.
Right.
So what are some things that stand out for you as far as some common advice that you hear a lot that you might suggest questioning?
Well, in the mainstream world, lifting heavy.
Yeah.
Don't that's probably one of the biggest things. Don't ever lift heavy. And I'm going to qualify that, okay? If you don't know how to do the thing you're supposed to do, you shouldn't be doing it in sets of 3 to 5 reps, much less sets of 20 reps. That is an irrelevant thing. Technical ability
Hmm.
is the main thing along the way, regardless of whether it's 1 rep, 5 reps, 3 reps, or 20 reps or whatever. But we all
Hmm.
know women, especially, even guys nowadays, are told, "Oh, don't do heavy work. It'll always hurt you. It'll always do that." And the reality is, especially if you separate it from the exogenous chemical crowd, okay?
Yeah.
You separate it from the guys who are using all kind of roids. The normal human being still is going to have to do something. Body weight, odd object, barbell, kettlebell, dumbbell, doesn't matter what it is. If you want to develop some muscle, and women, you are not going to get massive by doing sets of 5 reps. You're just going to get this incredibly toned, cool look, okay, when you actually lift heavy. And guys, you are not going to build an appreciable amount of muscle without some significant heavy work, okay?
Hmm.
Here's the thing. Safely done, intelligent, low repetition, heavy work is no more dangerous than high rep, no more dangerous than long, slow cardio, no more dangerous than any other way of doing it. It's the fact of how well your trainer can teach you how to do the exercise.
Hmm.
And I think that's a huge, huge, huge fallacy that trainers tell you. And they're going to tell you crap that you can't stop scientifically. Oh, only do 15 rep sets because that's going to give you long, lean looking muscle.
Oh, I know that's
That doesn't
ridiculous.
play out
Yeah.
scientifically. That doesn't
Yeah.
add up. And,
I saw
uh,
the ad like plyometric workout will give you long dancer's muscles. So it's going to change your genetic makeup to be like a dancer if you do these plyometrics. And I was like, oh my God, this is what they're
oh yeah.
selling.
And see, there's a thing that annoys me beyond almost like, dude, that one almost sets me off. And let me tell you why. Because first of all, people don't know what the reality of plyometrics is, so they're either not calling they're calling it plyometrics because it sounds cool, but it's not what they're doing,
Hmm.
or they're picking people who are not ready to do plyometrics. I'm gonna tell you this. I'm a grown strong man. I'm a big strong fella.
Yeah.
Athletic, fairly ready to do pretty much whatever,
Yeah.
and I don't do plyometrics.
You still don't do plyometrics. No.
Rarely do anything that's a
Exactly.
true
Yeah.
plyometric.
And the
Okay,
reason is
I might do because it's dangerous.
risk of injury.
The
Exactly. Thank you.
injury
Yes.
is
Yeah.
ridiculous. The
Yeah.
risk of injury is out of the question
Yeah.
for what they're supposed to do. And most of the people selling that are what they're trying to do is smoke you. They're trying to get metabolic deficit by doing high rep, explosive body weight.
Yeah.
And if it's a true plyometric, they're trying to do plyometric stuff, but they're trying to just smoke you and make it real super hard. Is what they're trying
Exactly.
to do.
It's
And
like the insanity workouts and shit.
That's exactly what it is. That's a
Yeah.
setup for injury. Now, one thing about it is what they're doing. A lot of what they're doing is you kind of could qualify it as plyometric, but it's really just simple jumping exercise. It's not a true plyometric. True plyometrics done by athletes are intense, explosive exercises that require a rebounding thing.
Yeah.
It's stuff like depth jumps. The average lifter, strongman, CrossFitter, whoever is not ready to do high-level depth jumps. You're just not ready to do that. It will hurt you. I don't care who you are.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, no, plyometric requires a stretch and then a flexion, like you're right, jumping, landing, and exploding, immediately exploding out of it. Yeah, and most people that are talking about plyometrics are not doing that. And yeah, exactly. When I had some athletes, hockey players that I would incorporate some of that. It takes weeks and weeks, at least, if not months, to get these young athletes ready to introduce a small amount of that into a program. And much of the time, it's not even necessary. They're going to get that in their training on the ice, that the sports-specific type training. But
when you add up the total wear and tear on the body, along with, especially if you're doing sports-specific stuff. So if you're taking a beating in the hockey rink 4 or 5 days, plus you're going off somewhere and doing sets of 10 in true plyometrics. Now, okay, here's the thing. Most people apply that label, and it's not real. If you're doing a box jump, that's not a plyometric. That's just a jump.
Exactly.
That's an explosive exercise. That's different. But now, if it actually becomes plyometric if you're doing sets of 20 reps box jumps, and if you're
up
jumping
and off and off. Yeah.
Jumping off the box. When you hit the ground and slam into the ground, and that's different.
Rebound.
That's not good for you.
Right. No. Exactly. No. Even when I had someone, this I don't want to take it off too far on a tangent, but someone just recently Facebook messaged me for information. That's great, eh? When you get info, and I'm all for it. You know what? People should ask questions online, but it's never going to replace working with a trainer. But ask questions if you feel someone's qualified, definitely. And if someone's a good trainer, they'll tell you, you know what, you have to see someone in person. But they're asking me about box jumps because they went to a CrossFit class and they're like, oh, I couldn't do it. And I'm, wait a minute, the first CrossFit class you've ever been to, they were trying to get you to do box jumps? Okay, First of all, warning signs. And then I did my CrossFit spiel. I said there's good elements and bad, but I would not do it. And then, unless you really want to get good at kipping, pull-ups, Olympic lifts for high reps and box jumps, if your goal is performance for those and you accept the risk of injury, okay. But if your goal is to get fit, strong, change your body composition, all these there's better ways to do it. Anyway, when I was telling her about box jumps, if you are going to do it, never jump off the box backward. Jump on, land soft, and step off. So definitely depth jumps or jumping off and landing eccentrically, loading ballistically takes a lot of strength and neural control and causes a lot of impact, and it does increase risk of injury. So I'm glad we touched on this one because plyometrics is just thrown around all over the place, and people jump into it. I mean, I mentioned CrossFit, and no offense to CrossFitters, I'm sure there's some beasts in that, but it's dangerous for injuries. But yeah, there's definitely that's one aspect where you definitely want, if it says plyo burst class or yoga plyometric class or some shit like that, maybe you want to take a pass.
Well, and I'm talking about, now I know some of the highest level lifters in the world. And I know very, very few of them who do anything like that. A few who cycle in some jumping, some explosive movements. I do that. I do a few jumps here and there. I don't do a plyometric jump, but I do a jump. I just saw a thing with Louis Simmons talking about one of his. He developed this amazing machine that basically allows you to do isometrics with an immediate explosion afterward. They were doing an isometric squat into a jump. But they weren't doing a plyometric, and you're talking about people who are, the chick he had doing it runs like a some ridiculous 900 or
Yeah.
something ridiculous, and the other guys are like 800, 900 pound squatters, and they weren't jumping off the stuff on the. I've seen one guy legitimately apply plyometrics and he's a smart guy who knows how to do it, and that's Jesse Kellum. But
Yeah.
in the strength world, and occasionally maybe Louis or some of those guys might do that, but it's a rare thing. It's a very small part of training, and that's a big thing. We'll tell you something. I think it gets a bad name in the hardcore side of what we're discussing as far as heavy. Back on how we got to this topic
Yeah.
is single reps. That
Hmm.
gets a terrible name that gets a bad rap amongst the hardcore guys.
Yeah.
And if you look through the history of strength, you can find a decent level of guys from almost every era of lifting who did huge amounts of singles and got super strong without getting hurt.
Okay.
It, you,
So
it,
basically
it,
testing their max frequently.
Very frequently. Very frequently. Going back to Arthur Saxon and the guys who ran around that period. If you look at that, that was a very popular style of training during that period, was regular single rep stuff. Now, it may or may not have been a true max at any one
Right.
point, but it was definitely heavy in a regular pattern.
Yeah.
Saxon talks exclusively about an almost completely singles rep routine. Herman Gorner did the same thing. Now, you're talking about a guy, Saxon, who was 200 pounds, 210 pounds, can bench press 350 pounds or more. You're talking about a Herman Groner, a 245-pound guy who had an 800-pound and a 700-pound one-hand deadlift. All right, that's just two examples coming from that era. Then you move into the slightly more modern era. All right, let's talk about guys like Hugh Cassidy, who is one of the fathers of modern powerlifting, who had a very single rep base routine and would follow often with back offsets, but he did lots of singles on a regular basis every week for squat, bench, and deadlift. Okay,
Cool.
and then move into the modern, or the relatively modern era, which is Mark. Okay, let's talk about Mark Chalet. Mark Chalet is one of the first guys to squat 1,000 pounds and deadlift around 900 pounds, and it had a routine that was almost exclusively nothing but singles, and I'm talking about only one or two singles even in the squat, bench, and deadlift, and that's all he did.
Well,
He settled on that as a routine later on. And then you got the guys who, okay, let's look at Westside as one example, and then I'll use myself as another example. Okay, those guys do singles every week of something, or very close to singles every week of something.
yeah.
And singles have been the biggest part of my squat, press, and pull training for the last 5 to 10 years. And they put me from a 700-pound squat to a 1,000-pound squat. Uh, it,
Shit.
it,
Okay, well, that counts.
Yeah, well, and people keep talking. They say that, and they say, "Oh, you don't build strength with singles. You just demonstrate strength." Let me tell you something. If you're doing 1 rep, or 3 reps, or 5 reps, or 20 reps, it is both a builder of strength and a demonstration of strength. Everything you do is exactly both of those things, regardless.
Hmm.
That is a completely illogical way to state that whole thing. And single reps are the top end of what I'm talking about with heavy lifting. Okay, yeah, you need to have good form. You need to know what you're doing, but the reality is your form is usually the best when you have the shortest, most
Yep.
intense level of concentration, which is a single rep. And people talk about it from this perspective. Oh, well, you're not physiologically ready to do a heavy lift. Well, let me ask you this: if you get out in real life and let's pop into the trapped under the car analogy,
Yeah.
are you going to say, well, I'm in the middle of my progressive cycle. I'm doing 8 and 10 rep sets right now, and I can't put forth a maximum effort to get this car off of me or my loved one or whatever. The human body is ready for whatever the human body is ready for. Now, you may not be ready for the specific poundage because you haven't handled it in a while, but the reps are irrelevant. And here's the other thing with the reps, okay? Which is safer, 450 for 3 or 5 reps, or 500 for 1 rep? In reality, the difference between what
Tell
you're
me.
going to be doing for low reps when you're doing that for size or strength and what you're going to be doing for singles is only going to
Hmm.
be a few pounds. It's not like
Right.
they're going to tell you do this, do 300 for a set of 5, and then do 700 for a single. Well, there's a major difference in that.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not going to look that way for most people. The reality is you can concentrate so well with a single because it's just one thing. It actually makes it at least as safe or safer, and it's right in that same wheelhouse. And for me, it created so much less total beating on my body or less total need for recovery that it actually worked better for me. But
Cool.
everybody's got that same thing in there somewhere. hardcore or non-hardcore world. The reality is learn how to do what you're supposed to do and learn how to do it well. And then actually lift something with some real weight because, number one, you can. Number two, it's how you grow muscle. Number three, it's how you get awesome. It just is. I'm sorry.
Perfect. No, well, that's good. You created a good argument for it. I want to remind me after the chat. I wanted to ask you some questions related to my training on that. If we could, but I don't want to take up our time on this because that's good. We covered some good topics. So let's keep going with that. We talked briefly about cardio. I touched on that briefly. Do you have any opinions on that? Because there's a lot being thrown around now as far as cardio being good, bad, what types of cardio should only do high-intensity interval training, long, slow cardio should be for athletes, and all. There's which is better for fat loss, etc. Right. What are your opinions on that overall? Frequency, type of cardio, etc.
Okay, here's the people I think you got to really look out for. Okay, if you're going to be separating it out for the mainstream people or even in the hardcore people as a trainer, okay, is you got the crowd that says don't do any cardio, okay, of any kind, okay, right. You got that, and usually here's what's happening with that. It's one of two things, okay, if they're coming out of the hardcore crowd or sometimes if they're just somebody who sells it as a trainer, what you've got is somebody who's using a ton of chemicals, a naturally lean person to begin with, who diets real super strictly and they can get by with it.
But the rest of usually it's associated with, like, if it fits your macros or very strict dieting, at least.
Okay, so let's talk about the reality is that most of us are going to have an Oreo once in a while, okay? It's going to happen. And you're talking about guys who, most of the people who give that, you have to qualify why and where somebody gives you a recommendation from, okay? And exactly what you said. You got people who are super, super strict dieting. Well, okay, if I eat nothing but one dry chicken breast and one leaf of lettuce every day for 6 months and don't do any cardio, I'll get leaner. I'll murder somebody after about a week, but I'll get leaner. It'll happen. It won't work. But that doesn't mean healthier. It doesn't mean your performance is going to be better. It doesn't mean, okay, I'm a believer that everybody needs some type of cardiovascular health. And I'm a believer in a widespread type of cardiovascular health, okay? And from a both performance as well as a body composition perspective and a health perspective, I think all of that works together. Now, if you got a favorite kind, that's one thing. That's awesome. Right. But if it's the only one you do, you're going to be missing something altogether. And I think a lot of, and not to step on toes there, Josh, but I know you're a fan of high-intensity cardio, and so am I.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just not a fan of high-intensity cardio solely by itself.
Yep.
I think there needs to be other areas being addressed to get to the top end of what you want to get to, and I think a lot of that you have to look at some things with a historical perspective. Okay. One of the things about the super high-intensity cardio bunch that brings it out, that to me says some things about it from the sales perspective of it, is they discount the history of the world, okay? Yes, you need high-intensity cardio. I believe everybody does. But athletes for the last 50 years have done both high-intensity and low-intensity cardio and have been pretty amazing. And the history of the world is filled with both of those things going back thousands of years, where you're doing short, intense burst stuff, and then where you do long, intense stuff. Now, or long, sometimes intense, and sometimes very moderate. Now, here's the thing with that. That doesn't mean I'm advocating you become a jogger.
Right.
Okay? I'm advocating you do what you want to do and maintain some ability to do things at a moderate to low intensity for a long period of time, as well as a super high intensity for a short period of time. Because that's how I think life rolls. Okay?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of what you talk, sort of interrupt when we've been on previous chats, if people have watched this previous chat, and I encourage you to go back on my videos, check out other gym chats Bud has been on, and you'll see that a lot of what you talk about is becoming a well-rounded, athlete or strong in every way. Increase overall abilities in a number of aspects in your life. So you are a strong man, I would say that, but you also want to be. I don't know if we talked about it before, but if the zombie apocalypse were to come, you're going to be one of their survivors, basically, right?
I hope so. Yeah. Well, but and as silly as that is, that makes my point. Okay, that exactly makes my point. So as silly as that thing is, it actually is actually quite a useful
I,
thing
I use it. Yeah.
for determining fitness. Because what if there is an emergency situation
Yeah.
like that? And so what are you going to have to do during that thing? You're going to have to fight very hard for short bursts of period of time, and you're
Hmm.
also going to have to walk and cover long distances or cover extended periods for long periods of time where it's going to be both intensely aerobic and anaerobic and bursts off and forth and back with that for both long periods of time.
Yep.
That is almost a perfect makes my point kind of a thing because
Yeah.
okay, now here's one thing I will say is the thing with that you you get you're going to get some long-term long ability cardio by doing short intense cardio, but you're not going to get the reverse. Okay, so if
Right.
you jog for 5 miles at a slow pace, okay, that don't mean you're going to run a bunch of 100-yard sprints with short recovery and do very well.
Exactly. And
If
that
you
that
can, if you can run a bunch of 100-yard sprints or maybe stadium stairs or whatever else with short recoveries, you might not beat anybody at a 5K or a 10K or whatever, but you'll survive it.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
one does build the other does not. However, that long aerobic base does make a difference. It does help with those other recoveries. It does that, And I'm not advocating anything, and I think if people are telling you to do that all the time, outside of a sport thing. Now, if you're a runner or a triathlete, that's a whole different situation. You got to do what you got to do for your own particular
Right.
thing.
That's sports
But
specific.
coming in from just normal people, I think the pounding that you get from trying to run every day, like I'll tell you what I hate the worst on this. This makes me want to slap people. Okay? And I'm a peaceful guy.
Yeah.
I am a peaceful guy. Like right before I had you on, I was on with the Dalai Lama. He calls me up. It's a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I mean,
well,
but,
okay, cool. I'll believe you. I'll believe you where thousands wouldn't. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Here's what I'm saying. Okay. Uh, uh, this is an example of this going stupid wrong. It is the Biggest Loser. Okay.
Oh
What
yeah.
do? They get people off of the couch and stick them on treadmills for running, trying to run, not walk, trying to run for like an
Yeah.
hour. Okay. That's
Yeah.
the dumbest thing well, that's a big statement. That's
Yeah.
one of the dumbest things that
It's up there.
happens in fitness today. Why? Because that's just as bad a problem as the opposite way. Okay, it's just as bad a problem. Sticking somebody into something they're not used to, okay, is a ridiculous thing. But I think there are just too many examples where people have done all kind of those cardios safely and done very well. I think I fit in an example of that in that a lot of the cardio I do now, I don't do a lot of running, but I do some walking and some biking and some rowing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I also do some intense cardio that lasts for an hour to hour and a half at a time. So I do some much longer type stuff. I'll tell you somebody else who's a great example of fitting in exactly what you want. And as long as you're recovering from the thing, doing well, is Alex Vieta.
Okay.
I don't know if you know him.
No,
Um,
I've heard
okay,
of them. I
Alex
don't know a
Vieta
lot
is a
about.
guy who is simultaneously a high level power lifter and
Mm-hmm.
a ultra distance runner.
Oh wow, shit. No, I
Okay,
wasn't aware of that. No.
yeah, so you're talking about a guy who walks around at about 230 pounds and is a raw 700 or so squatter and 4+ bench and nearly 7 or maybe over 700-pound deadlifter
Shit.
and is also running a 50-mile ultra.
Holy
Uh,
smokes.
yeah, with a half decent time, and also from what I hear, has a ridiculous 1 mile time of something just over 4 minutes. So I mean, you're talking, see what I mean? But now
Yeah,
what
that's
he's
crazy.
not
Yeah.
doing there, okay? If you break down what Alex does, he's doing what you and I do, just with different levels of different things, specialized to the individual thing. And there's what I mean. There's a place for a little bit of everything. It's just when people tell you the absolute extremes of stupidity, that's wrong. So if you look at what he does, it's squat, deadlift, bench once, twice a week. It's some intense cardio with repeats of 400s to 800s, that kind of thing. And then it's long, moderate to sometimes intense sessions with running or biking for several hours because that's his deal. He does
Mm-hmm.
Ironman level stuff and ultra level running. Well, so you got to train specifically for the thing you do. Um, I
I'll
think
look into I'll look into him before we get off,
well, you
just
should get
because
more.
I think it's interesting, and some people may not be aware of that. if you can give me his name again and any links to his bio and stuff, I'll put it down below for people to check out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. But so I think that's the thing with that is overhammering one type of thing to the total exclusion of the other is where you look to what they're telling you is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think, and I know there are benefits as far as capillarization and whatnot with long slow cardio. I think it's just when it's done to excess. If someone
absolutely
just runs to hell and doesn't do resistance training and thinks they can outrun a poor diet or something, that it's
absolutely. Because if they're telling you you'll just get fit by jogging, yeah, no, not going to happen. That's not going to work. And so let me qualify that within the totality of my program. Okay. I'm talking about once a week I go for a really long walk, and maybe once every week or 2 weeks I go do something a little more intense, like I row for an hour or maybe cycle or whatever. And a lot of that is just on my personal. I just want to do some crazy stuff. I want to be a 300-pound guy who can row a marathon.
Yeah.
Or you know what I'm saying? That's just my, that might be my crazy coming out.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, I always talk about the high intensity interval cardio just because it's far more efficient and it does have a carryover to long slow. But I still go for jog. We're looking taking care of a neighbor's dog right now. I still go running at least every other day. Go for a little jog with the dog out.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity for me to just take my shirt off in the neighborhood, and hopefully some of the housewives are checking me out too, right? You never know. So it's, but you don't get to do that in the privacy of your own gym. So I mean, even though I might bash cardio, I still do it. I just wouldn't make it like the mainstay of a program. But I totally hear your point, and then it's definitely, I agree. I think it is. You do have to question when it's the only thing that you recommended, or when it gets to extremes. But that brings me to some other, like, what about, first of all, was there anything else that popped in your head as far that you'd like to address that you hear a lot, this is the way it should be done, everyone else is wrong?
Well, let me say one more quick thing about the cardio thing.
Okay.
I have never seen anybody who was really big. Okay, I'm not talking about you're at 15% body fat trying to get to 10. I've never seen anybody who's really big like I am or was, okay, get really lean by doing only like short, like, now here's the thing, like people sell the intense cardio by doing just like 5-minute and 10-minute stuff, you know what I'm saying? Tabatas and that kind of thing. Tabatas are awesome, no question. Yeah. But I've never seen anybody get the caloric burn to really get super lean by not having some link to what they're doing. And here's what I mean. It does work for a lot of people, but I think from an endocrine perspective, it doesn't work for some people. Especially if they're on the bigger side, if there's somebody who metabolically just doesn't burn the kind of calories a other person does. I know I did years of that and never got much leaner until I added some length to what I was doing.
Okay.
And I think that, and I say that only because it's truly going to be helpful for a lot of people. Yeah, and let me conversely say this. I've never seen anybody get real super healthy who did nothing but long, slow, nothing.
Yeah.
You've got to get somewhere in the middle there. Okay, to move on there, I think this will probably be a good one to just, because I'm sure we have slightly different opinions on this, is stretching.
Yeah, there we go. Good. Let's go there. Okay, cool. So I think that the mainstream, the sort of conventional approach up till recently, last few years, was that you should stretch the hell out of your body all the time. Like I think it was recommended before training, after training, on a daily. Even now, there's still just stretch classes. Like I see people who stretch as their main way of fitness. Like, no, I don't train. I just do a lot of stretching. And I think yoga is sort of a divergent. Although there are a lot of forms of yoga which have a lot of isometric strength poses to them, which demand a lot of co-contraction muscles, but there's a lot of passive stretching in that. So and I think now, lately, in the last decade or so, there's been a swing to stretching should not be done before, only after training, and then even to the point, stretching is unnecessary and bad and it'll hurt you. Don't ever stretch. So So what's your opinion on these?
Well, I'm going to sit sort of in the let's look at things historically and let's look at things from a broad perspective, okay? And I think you find the people who are out of whack when they tell you don't ever stretch.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but okay, let me pick on my crowd. I come from the big, strong, let's be crazy, let's lift the heaviest thing in the world, and most of that crowd is inflexible. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? I mean, most of that crowd tying their shoes is about the extent of their stretching, and it's the most painful thing they do all day because it overstretches everything that they do. And I'm sorry, that is not a real level of fitness. Okay?
Right.
Neither is it a level of fitness if all you could go do is take a stretching class. And that, so okay, I can bend you in half like Gumby, but if I can actually do that to you,
Yeah. You
maybe you've
probably
got
don't
a
have a lot of
strength issue.
muscle.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's no reality in the real world about that. Um, I have gone to, and I think there are some smart things that have come out about stretching, and then some things that are well overblown. Okay, because you're going to hear people who are the anti-stretching crowd who say never stretch or never stretch your muscle this way, never do it that way, or whatever. Well, again, you got thousands of years of athletics. Nobody died from overstretching, and reality is most people who I've rarely ever seen an injury from overstretching. Okay, maybe you do the whole John Claude Van Damme from Bloodsport thing where the coconut trees are ripping. Okay, that's a bad
Hmm.
idea. That's a terrible idea. Where the
Looks really cool,
yeah,
though.
it looks cool, but it's a terrible idea. It's not.
Yeah.
Um, I do think there are some smart things that have come about. Okay, but I think that they one of the things that people go against now is never do any kind of static stretching. Well, I'm not for that. And I come from a background that specializes in stretching. I was a massage therapist and did that kind of things. And that was very, very helpful to me because I learned a lot of really effective stretching and I learned to do a lot of PNF type stuff.
Yeah.
And when I got that, I went back and really began to look at my background from stretching. And so here's how I learned the stretching as I went. Okay, had a car accident at 5 years old, had to learn to walk again, got put in Taekwondo. So the Taekwondo guys did a lot of static stretching, but they also actually did PNF. It's just nobody had a name for it
Hmm.
at that time period. And actually, if you quantify and look at let's face it, most stretching stuff comes from martial arts and then also some from athletics later on when it's more organized. But the really ancient stuff comes from martial arts.
Okay.
And these guys often do a dynamic type of stretching with different types of kicking, different types of dynamic movements. They
Yeah.
often do what I call it a gentle bouncing stretch. So it is a held stretch, which is a static stretch, but it's also with maybe short movements or slight movements. Technically, that's some type of a PNF stretch,
Hmm.
just depending on how you want to quantify it. But there's 5 or 6 different types of PNF stretching. Okay, if you don't know, people don't know what that means. That means passive neuromuscular facilitation.
Yeah.
Here's the quick.
Or proprio neuromuscular. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing with that. Okay, modern science says this. Okay, when you stretch a muscle, okay, that you're stretching the tendons, the insertions of the muscle, okay, and at every tendon around the body, you have what's called the Golgi tendon organ, okay, which is a little sensor basically that shuts down or turns on the muscle for pressure, okay. So if you're lifting a certain amount, that'll keep you sort of governed out to how much you can lift without generally tearing things, and it's the same in
Right.
stretching. You push down into a stretch, it lets you hold for a certain period of time, and then it actually shuts the stretch off. So by
Right.
doing light, now I'm not talking about that Jean-Claude Van Damme, super aggressive. You've seen football coaches do this crap, go lay on a guy and push him
Yeah.
down and push him down, that kind of thing. That's stupid, that's dangerous, that will hurt you, that's overstretching, okay?
Yeah.
Intelligent pushing into a stretch and then relaxing and then pushing and going further will quickly add to your flexibility, and it's a smart way to do it, and it's been done since ancient times. It's just we didn't talk about it. But I don't think that. So what we did is we tend to be culturally in fitness all or nothing. Okay, we can't be balanced. We can't be. So everybody was doing static stretching for the last 50 years. We threw the baby out with the bathwater
Hmm.
when people started to learn about when people started to learn about modern influences on stretching, which are actually ancient influences that have come back around. Uh,
Right.
so I do think there's some smart things. Okay, I don't think it's a hugely brilliant thing to do a ton of cold stretching.
Right.
Okay. At the same time, okay, let's go back to the zombie apocalypse. Okay.
Hmm.
If I have to touch my toes when I fall out of bed because a zombie's trying to kill me and I got to put my shoes on, I don't want to be so inflexible or so afraid of it that I'm like, oh my God, hamstring pulled because I had to touch my toes. I didn't warm up first.
Yeah.
Okay. Seriously, you ought to have developed a level of flexibility. That's not going to put you in that. That being said, most of the time, I think it's good to get some blood flow going before you do a massive amount of stretching. Okay? I think
Okay.
from a strength perspective, you're better off to do light stretching after a significant body warm up and then just do specific warm ups that prepare you for the specific lifts you're about to do without a ton of extra stretching. And I think the
Right.
smart stretching is done afterward.
Yeah,
The
I'd
one thing
agree.
we treat people is that we forget was yeah, it's a protein shake or beer 30 after my bench workout, and yeah, I'll stretch later. Yeah, well, that doesn't happen.
It doesn't. Yeah.
You
No.
know what I'm saying? I mean, we all know,
Yep.
dude, that doesn't, so neglecting it is just as big a problem as overdoing it. I do think certain sports require a significant better stretch for most people prior to engagement, but I also think you should be warming up ahead of time. So let me give you a straight example of this. Jiu-jitsu or any kind of a kicking-based martial art, okay? I think you're good to do a significant body warm-up and then some actual stretching because you are going to get in positions in a grappling or in a kicking type art where you're going to be in an extreme stretch and often an extreme stretch under load or an extreme stretch under speed contraction, possibly running like sprinting type stuff. I think it's probably a good idea to do some stretching beforehand because you
Hmm.
are going to get in extreme length of contraction under very hard contraction, and I do think that is helpful. So it's about putting it in the right place at the right time and then achieving a smart level. Now, one thing I will say the hardcore group does is bad is you hear this saying a lot. Just develop just enough mobility or just enough flexibility to do that, and anything else you do is a waste. It's not a waste from an I don't want to live in pain and I want to live a really long time and be able to tie my shoes when I'm 70 perspective.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, I think it's you gotta put it in. You gotta keep it one way or the other.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that's something you talked about as well in previous chats. Is why go for the minimum to be capable of doing the minimum necessary in any aspect of your life. You've
Yeah,
always sort of said go for as much, be as capable as you can in every aspect of ability as you possibly can, which is, can be difficult to incorporate into a program, especially if you have specific goals.
yeah,
But again, uh, I encourage people to check out our previous gym chats, and Bud sort of went over a little bit of an outline of program design, how he incorporates these different elements. And
yeah.
before we sign off, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That doesn't mean okay. Let me. Yeah, that doesn't mean if you're a 300-pound dude that you should necessarily be looking to be a contortionist.
Right, or a marathon runner, or right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
It just means there's no point in there's no point in barely because it's not going to take away from your performance to barely be able to keep the minimums of other types of fitness.
Exactly. Yeah.
In fact, in the long term, it's going to add to your performance as well as your health. And if you're looking for a mainstream trainer and they're not giving you a well-rounded idea
Hmm.
of things to do, then yeah, terrible idea, and you're looking at bad advice.
No, yeah, great. My approach, as you know, I'm not pro passive stretching, but what I do tell clients is that if they have range of motion deficits and they are going to be doing passive stretching, incorporate an active element to it. So PNF is one way to do that, where you're doing a contraction and then relax, contract, relax. Or if I can have someone doing, let's say the hamstring stretch is a pretty common example of PNF, they'll contract into me and then relax, and then as opposed to me passively pushing them, I'll encourage them to actively try and bring their leg up into that range, use their muscular strength to actually contract the antagonists and try and help me bringing them into range. So I like people, if they, as much as they can have an active component in their stretching, if they do passive stretching, follow up with an isometric hold of this position they stretch to for a few seconds. Just try and see if they can control those new ranges that they got. Just I like to see if people are not only flexible but stable. That's my only thing. If someone is strong and stable in these extreme ranges of motion, fine. Stretch the hell out of yourself, but I think you should be able to actually hold there and have some muscular stability in those extreme ranges, especially if you're a strength athlete. That's my only sort of caveat around that is that if you're doing a lot of passive stretching, if you put your arm in the door and you can get your arm way, way back there, but then when you let go and you can only get your arm to here, is that really like, do you have any muscular control way back in that range you established? So
Right, right.
that's something where
Again,
having a good strength training program where you're really controlling the positions that you contract into will help.
right. Well, and functional flexibility is what you're looking for there. We're looking
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
at flexibility with actual stability and actual thing. And here's the thing: we're also kind of talking about extremes there, except for the fact that most people are. If you want to quantify the average human walking on this planet, they are both inflexible and unstable.
Yeah.
And
No kidding. Yeah.
But
Walking injuries waiting to happen. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not like you're going to get. I think the extremes are where the real problems happen. So, like, if you're
Yeah.
stretching to a point where a joint's being compromised, that's a different thing.
Yeah. Of
But
course.
if you're, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, absolutely, of course. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And I think we're both the same page. Like I don't, going heavy on your stretching before a workout, you might, might be better off leaving it after because you don't want the muscles too relaxed before strength training. But I do agree with you with like doing some dynamic mobility work before, get your muscles warm, and then do some, the specific warm ups for those lifts for sure.
Yeah.
All of that, yeah, totally makes sense. And you're right. I think it's good to have a balance. Anytime there is something that's just an extreme, this is the only way to do things. Ask for an explanation. Why is that? What is the research behind it? Does it make sense? And then after, does it make sense to you based on all the other things you've learned? Do some research for yourself. Like we're all fitness expert here, but there's as a client or as a trainee, it's on you. The onus is on you to do your own research as well, right?
Right. Right. And okay, if you can find somebody you can trust, because let's be honest, okay, the average person comes to a trainer because they don't want to do that. They don't want to. They don't want to be out there researching a lot or that kind of thing. But you got to be smart. That's where if you're going to look for the average trainer, you got to get some real recommendations, and you got to get some real, stuff. The reality is, you're looking in the hardcore world. Most of you guys are not going to steer you stupid wrong. The hardcore world tends to be a little bit self-correcting, except for the real outlier stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Who are hardcore to the point of being like crazy to the point that everybody else is like, wow, we don't even talk to that guy. That's a different situation. But and here's the thing where people make a huge mistake. I'll tell you something trainers tell you that that is the absolute dumbest thing they should say. They say, I don't want to lift, and I'm not going to train you like a lifter. And that's a ridiculous thing, and I'll tell you why. Lifters have the best technique and the smartest programs. Yeah. So that's saying I'm not going to train you. I'm going to teach you to drive, but you can learn from a guy who drives for NASCAR, or you can learn from a guy who just got out of school himself and is running a local driving school. Well, who's going to teach you better?
Exactly.
Now, that doesn't mean, if it's a well-established program and there's intelligent stuff to do it, then yeah, you should be lifting like a lifter. The only difference is you're not going to dedicate every waking moment of your life to it, and you're not going to lift till blood comes out of your eyes. Okay?
Right.
That's the qualifying statement there. But when you say, I don't want to lift like a lifter, and you hear a trainer say that, so what they're really saying is, I don't want to have the best form. I don't want to be the strongest I can be. I don't want to have the most intelligent program. I just want to work a little bit hard and get some half-hearted results, when if I use the hair more effort and a smarter program and better technique, I could be twice the physical human specimen that I am. So there's another that really is a big thing in the hardcore. I mean, in the regular human world.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too, and often it's just that they don't want the pressure on them to have to instruct someone at that level either, or they don't have the expertise to do it anyway. So they're like, well, I choose not to for your benefit. Yeah, right. It's a cop out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I think we covered a lot of good points for people to digest. I'm going to go through the video and outline them down below in the description. Were there any resources that come to mind for you, like on this sort of topic, as far as maybe on your website or any other resources that you looked at that would help people sort of get into this, get some more information on making smart decisions around their training?
Actually, Josh, that kind of brings up a point, because there's really not a lot out there. As far as like,
on this
and here's what I mean by that. Okay, just because I got, like, you would think for normal people, okay, picking out a trainer, they're going to look for a guy who's certified. Okay?
Right.
Well, you and I know that certified don't mean squat.
Right.
I mean, literally, it means nothing.
It means you might be able to get it. You can get in some insurance. That's what it means.
Yeah, I mean, most of the large gym chains have their own certification program that's in-house. It's like 2 hours, and then you therefore have it. You are a certified trainer. That means nothing. I'd say this: go look around and see what people think about what's going on. Now, if you're gonna get a local trainer, look at the people they train, ask a bunch of questions. Um, don't let them intimidate you by the way they talk.
Yeah.
Okay, just because they know more about what than you do, you can learn pretty much anything they do. And look at their track record and really be smart about that. You know what? I don't
Hmm.
think there's a legitimate online thing to tell who's full of what, you know what I'm saying, or who's
Yeah.
really crazy. I think you have to. The biggest thing there is common sense. I and I'm not going to toot my own horn on this, but I did write an article that helps you, and I have actually a whole series that I'm going to fill out with this to help you tell who is real and who's not in strength training. There's a lot of stuff that people do that will help you tell the truth about who they are. And like some of the stuff, I'll tell you this: if they have no documentation of what they do,
Hmm.
period, then you can't pay attention to that because it's just too easy to
Yeah.
document things in the real world now. Everybody 5 years old and above has a camera phone. You know, I mean, you can look
Yeah.
anybody up on the internet at all and get some idea. Um, I will say this: most of the smart guys, okay, guys like Ross Anamite, um, Louis Simmons, Ed Cohen, guys who in that Pavel Sotzlane, they have some very smart stuff going on that you can get to them very easily. There's kind of a reason that they are who they are, and people are going to say that specifically. So those are guys I'd go to about that. Um,
Yeah.
those are resources I would talk to, and I think you got to look through reality in what's there versus just do they come up first under Google.
Yeah. You got to do some digging. Yeah.
You really got to do some digging. And the thing is, the topic is too broad. Like I'll give you the people who, all right, I learned to lift from the old school of the old time guys. So you want to look at the 100-year ago guys. I learned stretching from a massage therapy course that a guy named Aaron Mattis does, and I'm not even sure if he's even in the game anymore. But he's one of the first guys to bring out a PNF style. This is 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, he's a good resource if you can even get hold of his book, which I think is pretty obscure now.
Hmm.
I I don't know, Josh. That's what we're trying to
No, that
be. I'm saying we're
no,
we're
I think that's we throw some names there that are good for one resource, and I don't agree with everything that's shared on there, but like for personal trainers that I think is a good resource is the Personal Trainer Development Center,
right,
uh, ptdc.com.
right,
I'll put a link to that too. Just as far as something for me, like they, it's their objective of that site is it's just to hold trainers to a higher standard, and so I think they have some good. And sometimes it's just simple things like, does your trainer actually take notes on have a program plan for you, or they just come in and do whatever every day? Are they punctual? Do they have, like you said, there's some documentation of what they've accomplished? Do they have testimonials? There's some basic questions that you can ask. So I think that's a good one. I'll put the link to that down below too. For people that want to get a hold of you and find out more about what you do or have questions for you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
All right. Well, you can come straight to my website. That's www.strongerman.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere there or whatever. But and just come straight to my name, Bud Jeffries, under Twitter,
Cool.
on Pinterest, and we're trying to expand to all the ridiculous social media
All the
that's out
social
there. But
media.
I don't know
There's
how.
so many, right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. 50. Dude, it comes up
It's,
faster than I can learn it. So there's no,
yeah, I
you
know.
know.
It's nuts.
But the easiest, fastest ways is to simply go straight to my website as well as our Facebook page, and we're very, we kind of try to be as engaged and as we can possibly be in those things, so you can get answers. And I got to put a lot of resources on there with smart people, as well as got a lot of articles. In fact, I just wrote one today about that's probably going to it's going to tick some people off because I wrote about who has the holy grail of how you're actually supposed to squat,
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah,
which is
that'll
like
ruffle feathers one way or the other.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's like a jihad about to happen on that, dude. That's like
Yeah,
but and the reality is that again, let's make smart decisions and prove things out, and so that's the whole point behind that. Plus, just to be funny and have fun and teach people
yeah, of
reality
course.
really there, you know.
Yeah, cool. Well, when you post that, make sure you tag. Are you gonna share it on Facebook and everything?
We'll look it up on the site and on Facebook, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, tag me in there for sure. I'll
Okay.
share it. Right on. Thanks again. I'll put all the links to these down below. So if you're watching, do check them out and take a look at the links, or just contact us directly or leave a comment on the video below, and I'll make sure to hook you up with any answers. And once again, Bud, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an awesome topic. I think we had some great info.
Yeah,
Share.
thank you. Appreciate it, bud.
Yeah, look forward to doing it again. I'll always love to have you back on the show.
Absolutely.
And we do have a busy few weeks booked up now, have guests scheduled for the next couple months. So for those watching, make sure you do check in next week again. And until then, stay strong.